Before the first road was laid, before the first city rose from dust and stone, before human memory learned how to write its own history, rivers were already here. They flowed through empty valleys, carved through ancient mountains, and whispered through forests untouched by time. Every civilization ever born has risen beside moving water, because rivers were the first roads, the first sources of food, the first mirrors in which humanity saw its own reflection. If you stand at the edge of a river long enough, you begin to feel something older than language. The water does not rush blindly forward, it remembers. It carries the scars of glaciers, the warmth of deserts, the silence of mountain snow, and the weight of oceans not yet reached. Every drop has traveled farther than any human ever could, passing through stone and sky, cloud and soil, animal and leaf, again and again through endless cycles of transformation. High in the mountains, where the air grows thin and the horizon feels close enough to touch, rivers are born quietly. A single snowflake melts against dark rock. A thin line of water begins to creep downhill. It gathers others, it quickens, it deepens. What begins as a fragile thread soon becomes force, carving valleys, splitting cliffs, and shaping entire continents over millions of years. No empire has ever moved as much earth as a river does without sound. Rivers are not merely water in motion. They are living corridors of energy. They regulate climate, distribute heat across the planet, and connect ecosystems separated by thousands of miles. The Amazon alone releases so much moisture into the atmosphere that scientists refer to it as a flying river, generating rain far beyond its physical banks. In Asia, the monsoon cycles depend on massive river systems born from Himalayan glaciers. In North America, rivers stabilize temperatures, feed forests, and sustain wildlife on continental scales. Life followed rivers long before humans did. Fish developed bodies shaped by currents. Amphibians learned to breathe between two worlds. Birds mapped river valleys as invisible highways across the sky. Predators learned where prey must drink. Plants learned where floods would deposit fertile soil. Evolution itself bent around flowing water, shaping jaws, limbs, camouflage, and migration patterns with silent precision. As rivers grow wider, their voices deepen. Rapids shout against stone. Slow bends whisper through reeds. Floodplains breathe in and out with the seasons. During rains, rivers expand beyond their borders, surrendering their strict outlines and dissolving into broad sheets of reflective silver across entire landscapes. During droughts, they retreat inward, exposing patterns in the mud that look like ancient writing no one can fully translate. And yet, no two rivers are ever truly alike. Some surge violently through rock, fed by glaciers and storms. Others drift gently through grasslands, barely disturbing the surface as if afraid to break the spell of the sky they reflect. Some vanish underground for miles, hidden in limestone veins, only to reappear unexpectedly in glowing springs of turquoise and blue. Rivers are not straight lines. They are negotiations between gravity, geology, and time. They bend where rock resists, split where sediment yields, and wander because water seeks the path of least resistance, even if that path stretches endlessly sideways instead of forward. In these curves, entire ecosystems form. Oxbow lakes are born from abandoned loops. Wetlands emerge where rivers forget their way. New habitats appear simply because water chose to hesitate. For early humans, rivers were teachers. They taught patience through seasonal floods. They taught danger through unpredictable currents. They taught abundance through fish migrations that shimmered like moving constellations beneath the surface. Entire calendars were built around river rhythms. Planting followed flood cycles. Harvest followed retreating waters. Survival itself learned to pulse in time with river breath. And still, even now, when satellites map every bend and dam reshapes entire watersheds, rivers remain partially unknowable. No model can perfectly predict a flood. No equation can fully describe turbulence. The movement of water resists total control, reminding us that nature still speaks a language beyond machinery. As the river continues its journey toward the sea, it carries not only minerals and nutrients but stories. stories of mountains worn into sand, stories of forests fed and cities drowned, stories of creatures that rose, ruled, and vanished. And as we move deeper into the river's path, we begin to understand that to follow a river is not merely to trace water, but to trace time itself. The deeper we follow the river, the more we realize it is not empty space between banks, but a crowded world in constant motion. Beneath the surface, entire civilizations of organisms live and vanish in rhythms invisible to the human eye. Algae bloom in sunlight, producing oxygen that feeds fish and insects. Microscopic plankton pulse through the flow like drifting galaxies. Insect larvae anchor themselves to stone, waiting for the moment they will break free into the air above. Fish navigate currents using senses far more precise than human instruments, detecting pressure changes, vibrations, and chemical trails carried for miles. Salmon return to the exact gravel beds where they were born after years in open ocean, guided by magnetic fields and sent memories written into their bodies before they ever learned to swim. Eels make journeys even more mysterious, traveling thousands of miles from rivers to deep ocean spawning grounds no human has ever directly observed. Every migration rewrites the river with movement. Rivers also carry energy in quieter ways. They act as planetary cooling systems, absorbing heat in warm regions and releasing it in cooler ones, softening temperature extremes across continents. They sculpt storm patterns, influence monsoons, and regulate regional climates with steady consistency. Without rivers, weather itself would unravel into extremes few ecosystems could survive. Human civilization learned to borrow the power of rivers long before it learned to fully respect it. The earliest irrigation systems emerged along riverbanks, transforming deserts into breadbaskets. The Nile's predictable floods allowed Egypt to rise with clockwork precision. The Tigris and Euphrates gave birth to writing, mathematics, and law. The Indus Valley managed water with engineering sophistication that still impresses scientists today. And yet, every attempt to control rivers carried a price. Dams slowed currents, changed temperatures, trapped sediments that once nourished coastlines. Fish migrations were severed. Floodplains were starved. Where rivers once renewed soil naturally, artificial fertilizers now struggle to replace what water once delivered freely. Modern science has revealed that rivers are not isolated systems but arteries connecting land, sky, and sea. Nutrients washed from distant mountains feed plankton blooms hundreds of miles offshore. These blooms sustain fish populations that feed humans and marine predators alike. When rivers weaken, oceans feel it. Coral reefs bleach, fisheries collapse, entire food chains unravel. Pollution adds another invisible burden. Heavy metals settle into sediments. Plastics fragment into particles small enough to enter cells. Chemicals once thought harmless accumulate through trophic layers until the strongest predators carry the heaviest loads. Rivers remember everything we place into them, and they deliver those memories downstream with perfect fidelity. Yet even under pressure, rivers adapt in astonishing ways. Microorganisms evolve to break down hydrocarbons. Fish alter spawning patterns. Plants colonize newly shifted banks within seasons. Life does not wait for ideal conditions. It works with what remains. At night, rivers change character. Surface reflections dissolve into moving darkness. Predators rely on sound instead of sight. Bats skim the air inches above water, harvesting insects in flashing arcs of sonar-guided precision. Frogs synchronize calls into vibrating orchestras. Even silence along a riverbank carries layered depth, as if the water itself is breathing beneath the stars. Standing beside a river after sunset, time feels suspended. The surface glows faintly with reflected moonlight. Current pulls unseen currents beneath. You realize how little of the river is ever visible, how much always remains hidden below skin-deep ripples. The river never fully reveals itself. It only offers glimpses. For as long as humans have followed rivers, they have also fought over them. Control of water meant control of survival. Kingdoms expanded along river corridors. Armies marched beside currents that fed both supply lines and defense. Borders were drawn through channels that refused to stay fixed, shifting with erosion and flood, redrawing human maps without permission. Trade followed rivers like blood through veins. Canoes and barges carried grain, gold, spices, timber, and ideas across vast distances. Languages mixed along riverbanks. Cultures braided together in markets where freshwater met salt. Entire cities grew from the simple logic that where water flows, people gather. But rivers have also been executioners. Floods erased settlements that grew too confident. Storm surges pushed seawater upstream, poisoning wells and fields. Ice jams crushed bridges. Even today, despite satellites and warning systems, rivers still claim lives every year with brutal unpredictability. Spiritually, rivers took on meanings far beyond their physical force. They became symbols of passing, rebirth, and cleansing. The Ganges carried the prayers of millions. The Jordan marked transitions of identity and faith. In countless traditions, to cross a river was to cross between worlds, childhood and adulthood, life and death, ignorance and awakening. Artists painted rivers as mirrors of emotion. Poets wrote of water as sorrow and renewal. Musicians followed the rhythm of currents in blues and folk songs. Even modern cinema returns again and again to rivers as backdrops for transformation. Something in moving water continues to mirror the human condition with unsettling accuracy. Yet despite their significance, modern society often treats rivers as infrastructure rather than living systems. We straighten them to fit cities. We bury them in concrete culverts. We teach children to fear floods without teaching them why rivers flood. The rhythm that once guided entire civilizations has been reduced to a resource line on planning charts. Climate change now pushes rivers into unfamiliar territory. Glaciers retreat, reducing long-term flows. Rain patterns intensify, producing both deeper droughts and more violent floods. Rivers that once followed predictable seasonal cycles now surge or vanish in extremes that strain both ecosystems and human infrastructure. And still, rivers endure. They reroute around collapsed banks. They cut new channels through abandoned farmland. They reclaim forgotten neighborhoods after neglect. Left long enough, moving water always redraws the land closer to its original logic. Eventually, every river reaches its quiet surrender. The current slows. Salt begins to mingle with freshwater. Sediments settle into broad deltas where life multiplies with explosive abundance. Mangroves take root. Marshes pulse with birds and fish and insects in numbers that defy counting. Here, the river becomes neither land nor sea but both at once, a final transformation before disappearance. And yet the river does not truly end. It becomes cloud. It becomes rain. It becomes snow on distant mountains where new threads of water begin their long descent once again. The journey has no final destination, only endless return. Human beings now stand at a turning point in that cycle. For the first time in history, we influence nearly every major river on Earth at once. Our dams slow them. Our cities divert them. Our waste fills them. And our warming climate reshapes them faster than ecosystems can fully adapt. But we also carry knowledge no civilization before us ever possessed. We can see deforestation from space. We can trace pollutants through molecular signatures. We can model floods before storms ever form. We understand at last that a river is not an object to be owned, but a process to be protected. Rivers taught humanity how to settle, how to grow, how to trade, how to dream. They shaped our myths, our calendars, our survival itself. And now, in quiet ways that rarely make headlines, they are waiting to see what we will become in return. Because when the rivers change beyond recovery, it is not water that disappears first. It is memory, it is food, it is climate, it is history, it is future. And yet, if we listen closely, the river still speaks, in the steady pull of current, in the quiet rebirth of wetland grasses, in the silver arc of fish breaking the surface at dusk. The river is still moving forward, offering its ancient lesson once again. Nothing survives alone, everything flows together.